Hey guys, welcome back to more political chatter. Today we will be talking about this breaking new poll that we have from the state of Alaska. Now, this is an absolutely stunning poll coming from Alaska that really paints a picture at how bad 2026 the midterms will be for the Republican Party and how positive things can look for Democrats if they run the right candidates. So this is a poll from Alaska. Alaska is a state that voted for Donald Trump in the last election, 2024, by 13 percentage points. Now, in this poll, we see Mary Peltola defeating the incumbent Republican Senator Dan Sullivan by 2% in the 2026 midterm race. Now, Mary Peltola, if you don't remember, was the former U.S. representative from Alaska. She won this seat if we look back here, she won the seat back in 2022. She won it over Sarah Palin by a stunning 10 points, 9.9%. She came out of nowhere and she took Alaska by storm. That was a very good performance, obviously, but just 2 years later, facing a new Republican candidate, she lost. She lost by 2% on election day. It was a close race, but she still came up short. But she has proven to be obviously a much stronger candidate than the National Democratic ticket. When Harris lost Alaska by 13 points in 2024 on the same ballot as we just looked at, Peltola lost by 2. So Mary Peltola is a very strong candidate. She has definitely established that, and she is proving once again to be a strong candidate statewide, not only for her old House seat, but also facing off against a Republican for Senate. Not just any Republican, though, not a Sarah Palin or even a Nick Begich. No, facing off against an incumbent Republican senator, she is proving to be a very strong candidate, flipping this seat from red to blue, which would be absolutely crucial looking ahead to 2026. If Democrats are looking to reclaim control of the Senate, first they look to North Carolina. This is my current forecast, by the way. I'm sorry, first they look to holding Michigan and Georgia, then they look to flipping Maine, then they look to flipping North Carolina, and then they have to go to Texas. And it appears, based off this poll, that Alaska is in reach. To get that 51st seat, they would have to look towards Alaska. And Alaska is quite an interesting state because it's one of these states that we actually have seen improvements for the Democrats throughout the Trump era. I mean, looking back to Donald Trump's first election back in 2016, we see that he won Alaska by 15% when he ran. Now, 8 years later in 2024, he won by 13. It's certainly not a massive trend towards the Democrats, but it's a trend towards the Democrats. Nonetheless, you are not seeing that in many of these states. We could just look in very few states. Sorry, I'm trying to compare these maps here. But overall, in very few states, we are seeing from 2016 to 2020, the Democrats actually making improvements from the last time here. Now we could look. As you could see, okay, there are actually quite a few, more than I thought. But especially looking at 2012, for example, there are only a handful, or 2008, really, there are only a couple. I mean, you've only got a handful of states from 2008 to 2024 that have become more democratic. This is when 2008 was Barack Obama versus John McCain. 2024, of course, was Harris versus Trump. I mean, 2008 was a blowout for Democrats. 2024 was a very strong performance for Republicans. So you're going to find very few states that have become more democratic in the throughout those years. But Alaska is one of them, and it's the one that shifts by the highest margin. You could see in Alaska since 2008, it has become 8% more democratic, and that's on the presidential level. That was with Kamala Harris in 2024, a relatively weak candidate. You've only got Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Washington, Georgia, and Maryland any margin, any amount more democratic. You've only got a few states that are actively trending towards the left, And Alaska is one of them. I mean, even from 2012 to 2024, Romney, not a strong candidate at all, but we still saw Alaska become more Democratic since then. So it's something that we're seeing in Alaska. We could even take a closer look here in Alaska's counties. Um, oh God, but there has been a trend, especially around the Anchorage area, towards the most populous from the most populous part of the state, towards the Democratic Party. Anchorage has become 17 points more Democratic from 2008 to 2024. 2012 to 2024, it's become 11 points. These rural, they're not counties exactly. I forget what they're called. They're basically voting districts. These are rural voting districts where pretty much nobody lives. They see rapid back and forth motions when it comes to their trend between whatever year in 2024. But we are really seeing a consistent trend and around Anchorage, by far the most populous part of the state, increasing in population that is driving this shift towards the Democratic Party. So Democrats should have hopes for Alaska when it comes to the future. Alaska, not a big factor when it comes to the presidency, and Democrats still are very far away from winning Alaska on a federal on a presidential level. That would take a very strong sort of outsider anti-establishment candidate, which Dems are unlikely to nominate. Maybe though. But they apparently are seeing massive hope when it comes to their House races, when it comes to their Senate races. I mean, as we just talked about, in 2022, we saw Mary Peltola come out of nowhere to win Alaska by 10 points. Keep in mind, Republicans won the House of Representatives in 2022. They won a majority. If we look here, if my mouse stops not loading, um, but if you look at the overall votes in the House races nationwide in 2022, Democrats did outperform expectations, but they still lost the House popular vote. They lost it by 2.7%. It was 50 to 47.3. So to see Alaska Democratic plus 10 when they are a Republican state and Republicans won the nationwide vote, it really says something about Alaska specifically. It means that Alaska is trending blue relative, in its own right, but especially relative to the nation. I mean, we could look back, we could compare the trend in Alaska versus the United States as a whole. In 2020, in the House elections, Democrats won by about 3% in the nationwide House vote. They won by 3%. 2 years later, of course, as we just said, Republicans won by about 3%. So that's a 6 point trend from Democrat to Republican in these House races nationwide. About a 6 point trend. Dems won it by six, the popular vote in 2020. In 2022, Republicans won it by three. That's a 6 point trend towards the right. Now, what did we see in Alaska? Well, Don Young in 2020 won by 9%. 2 years later, in 2020, Peltola won by 10. From 9, from R plus 9 to D plus 10. That is a 19 point trend towards the Democratic Party, when this year there was a 6 point trend towards the Republicans. So that's meaning that Peltola, in terms of trends, outperformed national Democrats by a whopping 25%. So all in all, Mary Peltola obviously has an electability factor about her. I mean, she is she really embraces the fact that she is a rural Democrat. She's very pro-gun. Her slogan is what, pro-fish, pro-fish, pro-gun, pro-worker or something. I forget. But she really leans into these very rural, anti-establishmenty Alaska values that they have up there in Alaska, and she has been able to really establish herself as a consistent outperformer of the national Democratic ticket. I don't know if she is what Democrats need in a nationwide scale. Don't get me wrong, but specifically for Alaska, she has proven to be a very strong candidate. So when it comes to 2026, I don't care what this poll says, this will be an uphill battle. If the election were tomorrow, I would still think that Dan Sullivan would have to be favored. I mean, just based off of that 13-point win for Trump in 2024. But if you have a perfect storm in this race, similar of what we're seeing in Texas and in Georgia in 2026. But what I mean by that with a perfect storm is you've got an incredibly unpopular president. This is his approval rating according to the Economist tracker in each state. In Alaska, he's down. He's disapproved of by a lean margin. In a state, he won by 13. This is Donald Trump now. But you've got an unpopular administration and an unpopular national party, that being the Republicans, in office right now and controlling Alaska specifically. They have the House seat, they have the Senate seat, they have the state house, probably the state Senate. So you've got an unpopular Republican Party, and then at the same time, you've got an incredibly popular and incredibly electable and strong Democrat probably running. I should have said this earlier. Mary Peltola has not officially joined the race. But when you've got numbers like this is now one of numerous polls that have shown Mary Peltola in a position like being ahead. I believe there was another earlier this year that had her ahead. All of them are showing at least a very tight race. It's another indication that Mary Peltola is at least considering a run and probably will jump into this race. So, one more thing, again, I touched up on this before. Democrats absolutely need Alaska, according to this poll. I just made a video before talking about Democrats' path to a majority, and I said it runs through Georgia and Michigan. Though those would have to be holds for Democrats. It would run through Maine and North Carolina. Those would be flips. That would put them at 49. I said they would need Texas, and then I went to Nebraska. I said that Dan Osborne would have to win in Nebraska, that independent there, and Dems would have to hope that he would vote for with them on major pieces of legislation, which I do expect Dan Osborne would. Build Back Better comes to mind, etc. These progressive economic legislation bills. And I bet he would vote with them. But so I counted him as a Democrat. That would be 51. But now when you've got numbers like this, I trust this poll a lot more than an internal Dan Osborne poll in Nebraska that had him up by 1, especially considering the fact that we had numerous polls from 2024 where Dan Osborne was leading, and he ended up losing by 7. So I have a lot more faith in this poll than anything Dan Osborne's campaign puts out, unfortunately. So I would now change my path for Democrats, and I would say it would run through Alaska. They would have to win Alaska by whatever margin to get their 51st seat, and then they could look at Dan Osborne in Nebraska or Sherrod Brown in Ohio or Nathan Sage in Iowa, etc. So this is where things stand right now. A major, major race shaping up in Alaska. That will be very, very interesting. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe down below. That helps out a lot. Drop a like as well so this video does well in the algorithm. Drop a comment. Let me hear your thoughts on this. Go watch one of my other videos, and I will see you all later.